whose name sleeps in my heart, and there it is. It's apart my eyes windows to the beauty of your name. 7 letters that I've loved formed to.
Good morning, dear viewers of IMAM HUSSEIN TV, and welcome to another episode of Morning Baraka. It is Friday, and it's the last Friday morning of the season, Zara.
Absolutely, and it's quite sad, although we're nearing the end of the series, it's okay because we will be back very soon.
Inshallah, inshallah. I really hope that the viewers have learnt and enjoyed the series much like we have. It's really important that we always remember Ashura and what happened during the events of Ashura and also after Ashura.
Absolutely, it's vital that we keep the memory and the commemoration of Imam Hussein alive, and it's important to spread his message of what befell the Imam, who sacrificed himself to save the basic values that in fact cherished by all communities around the world, regardless of race, creed and colour.
Yeah. We must really educate not only ourselves but each other on the significance of the sacrifice of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but also keep the rituals associated with Imam Hussein alayhi salam alive and going.
Inshallah, we will benefit and reap the benefits from all forms of Azadari, and Allah grants us the tawfiq and barakah from our sincere du'as, inshallah.
Inshallah. Well, let's begin the barakah this morning. We will be starting with Brother Mustafa Ali, who will once again be blessing our studio with a beautiful recitation of the Holy Quran and an ayah or a verse from Surah Imran.
We have Brother Ibrahim Ansari on the couch with our daily du'as. Today we will be discussing the ziyarat of Sayyidah Zainab, peace be upon her, and I'm really looking forward to this, one of my favourites.
Inshallah. Also bringing you live footage from those on pilgrimage, absolutely taking part in the Arabeen walk. It's really amazing to see the many lovers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam gathering together to commemorate his martyrdom. After that, we also have the poetry and recitation aspects of the show. This morning we'll also have the poet Nouri Sardar back on the couch discussing not only his poetry but his personal life when it comes to poetry as well.
Excellent. And then we have Sister Masuma Jafar answering your personal questions and queries with Dear Masuma.
Much looking forward to that. We also have, once again, our cutest guest of the morning, a young girl who's embarking on a journey to educate us on the rituals during Muharram and Safar.
And finally, we have Sayyid Muslim Shah on the couch with your thick questions and queries.
Right now, we are giving you an opportunity, quite unique to Imam Hussein TV, to deliver a personal ziyarah to any member of your deceased family or friends with our colleagues in Karbala, namely Brother Ali.
And recall how in the night I'd call with the sunrise and sunset, your love I'd share. On one side, a beloved.
We are born with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We learn to crawl, to walk, to read and to write. We live our lives. We donate to humanity, we donate to society, and we donate to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Before you know it, we die. We leave this life and we move on to the next journey. Morning Baraka is offering you the chance to help your loved ones on their journey. We are taking down names of your loved ones who are no longer with you to dedicate a recitation of the holy ziyarat of Imam Hussein to them. Our reciters will recite a ziyarat Ashura on your loved one's behalf, right here from the holy land of Karbala and in front of the holy shrine of Abi Abdullah Hussein, Aba Abdullah. We understand the pain of losing a loved one and wanting to do the best for their akhirah. That is why Morning Baraka is giving you the opportunity to give comfort to those who have moved on. All we want you to do is to send in the names of your loved ones, family members, neighbors, friends, associates, and we will recite and donate to their akhirah only on Morning Baraka here on IMAM HUSSEIN TV 3.
If you would like to participate in this initiative, please send the name of the marhum you would like the ziyarat read for to either Morning Baraka at IMAMHussein.tv or comment your marhumeen's names on our Instagram page at IMAM HUSSEIN 3 TV, and we will make sure this gift reaches them.
And recall how in the night I'd call with the.
Yes, welcome dear viewers, and before we delve right into the segment of the daily du'as. Of course, as ever, we're going to be listening from Mustafa Al-Ali. Mustafa, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah.
Good, good.
Brilliant. So, as our previous two episodes, we've really taken a deep dive into the Surah Al Imran. Today we're going to be focusing on verse 133 onwards.
Inshallah.
And again, as ever, we very much look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين. الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون. أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ونعم أجر العاملين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Amazing. Ahsantum. Well done, Mustafa Ali, for another rendition of the Holy Quran. Actually looking specifically into the Surah of Al-Imran, and he covered towards the end of it, of the last 3 episodes, he covered Al-Imran, the chapter of Al-Imran. Today he covered verse 133 onwards, so many thanks for his time.
Yep.
This part of Morning Barakah, we're looking into specifically the du'as that are associated with the months of Muharram and Safar, the events of Ashura and Arabeen, and of course that's with our guest Ibrahim Al-Ansari. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How's your morning going so far?
Alhamdulillah, so far so good with the presence of the two of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Likewise, I'm hoping you're going to wake us up.
Yeah.
Obviously, Brother Mustafa Ali was amazing. And we're looking forward to this segment as well, where you're going to speak to us about the ziyarah of Sayyidah Zainab.
Inshallah.
Okay.
Ziyarah of Sayyidah Zainab, a very beautiful ziyarah. Many important parts in it which specifically talk about her role. And the thing is we see about Sayyidah Zainab is that her role started from the minute, literally from the minute that Imam Hussein fell off his horse. That is when Sayyidah Zainab's role started. Because when Imam Hussein fell off his horse, that is when they actually attacked the tents. They didn't wait for his killing.
Right.
And if you realize when you go to ziyarah, and we mentioned the ziyarah of Imam Hussein in the last episode, I believe, we realize that where Imam Hussein is buried, then when we go a bit towards, so if we leave, for example, the Qibla to our back, and we go towards the left, we'll see there's another, like what we call shibbaj, and that one is in red, towards the left, if we keep the Qibla to our back. That specific place, then if we keep on going towards the left and a bit to the back, we see, outside the shrine, we see a place where they called it Mukhayyam. Sorry, the Tell is Zainab. And then further down is where the Mukhayyam is. So it's it's actually perpendicular.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? Haven't done maths for a long time now.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. But essentially what you're saying is basically if you take a bird's eye view of the city of Karbala, you can actually map everything that happened.
Yes,
so from what you're saying in terms of where Imam Hussein was killed, where Abu Fadl Abbas was killed, where his Abu Fadl Abbas's right arm and and left arm were severed, even to the Furat, up until, for example, the Mukhayyam, as you were talking about, and the Tel Azay. So it's amazing how if you just look at it from a bird's eye point of view, you can actually map all of the action points within.
And it doesn't matter how busy the streets are, it's lined up quite congested.
It is. And it's very specific. And for the specific point that I want to mention is the exact points of where the grave is, to where the killing happened, to where the Tel is, to where the Mukhayyam is. There's a direct line there. The reason I'm mentioning that is because her role started from when they attacked the tents, she ran out. She stood on top of a Tel. A Tel is literally a hill. Not too high.
A mound, isn't
but
it?
So she stood on there and she shouted, Akhi ya Hussein, Adrikna, come to our aid. Imam Hussein, being in the winds he was, it's narrated that he started crawling towards the tents. And that part where we see where it is read in the shrine, that is where the killing actually happened. Where Imam Hussein is buried, that is where he fell off his horse. So Imam Sajjad ﷺ buried Imam Hussein where he fell off his horse. That red part is where the actual killing happened. And you see that it is directed towards where? Towards the Tel. And then directed towards the tents, if you were to carry on that line. Because that is what Imam Hussein was going towards. So when she was shouting that, as he was approaching this, of course Shimr stops him, while the children and the tents are being burnt and the children are running from tent to tent. This is where the role of Sayyidah Zainab starts, because even before the killing of Imam Hussein, she has to turn around, she has to go back to the tents, and she has to save the children. And this is where the true role starts. Not only that, after that, Sayyidah Zainab holds a very important role on that specific day, where after the killing, this is after the killing, that was before the killing, now after the killing, then the whole army attacks the tents. They come inside the tent of Imam Zain al-Abidin. They see Imam Zain al-Abidin, they said, did we not kill all the men? Kill him! Lady Zainab is the one that stands in front of them. and she says to them, if you want to kill him, kill me first. This is the bravery we're talking about.
And is that where they had just a bit of shame in the sense that they didn't want to kill a woman?
And they turned around and they left. Meaning the role of Sayyida Zainab was not just a role of saving children. It wasn't just a role of putting the fire down. It was the role of saving Imam.
Well, you say that, and I find that that's an absolutely beautiful explanation, because we were having this discussion just a few days ago, saying about the role of Sayyida Zainab as a female, that she left Medina, and yes, she had written, had explained that, I will never leave my brother. She had this worldly relationship with her brother, but her role to accompany that caravan was not just as a sister, was it? Also as an aunt. It was as to protect the imamate, and her husband equally was a part of it. He stayed home, and when you look at the role of women generally going through time, and for us in this modern era, that we have a responsibility on our own selves, that as women we keep our imam's duty towards him for our own responsibility. It's not incumbent upon our spouses, on our parents. It's our responsibility. And she's an amazing role model for that, because as you said, she protected Imam at that crucial point.
And the thing is, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, he knew that Lady Zainab was to be the protector of the Imam. Reason being is, the evidence for that is, when Imam Hussein is about to go into the battlefield, out of all the other women, Lady Zainab was the only one that he actually put his hand on her chest and made dua for her. And he put his hand on her chest and he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep her steadfast. Because Lady Zainab, with what she saw on that day, she wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for the dua of Imam Hussein. Meaning Imam Hussein knew the importance of Lady Zainab, hence why out of all other women, and even Imam Hussein could have made dua for Imam Ali Sajjad to recover, right? Imam Hussein could have made dua for a specific person, a big man that is able to take care of such a big family, to put some rahmah, mercy in his heart to take care of them. No, he put his hand on Lady Zainab.
Even her lineage, we talked in one of the previous mornings about the purity of the womb that Imam Hussein was born in, and all of their children of Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima. She's also a part of that womb, the purity. So when she speaks in Yazid's palace, they say that they remind her of Imam Ali speaking, and you think, what ferocity did she have in her, that she had this obviously hijab that was just so perfect, and yet when she needed to speak up, she spoke.
I think that is a very important thing to mention, because a lot of people have this idea of women in Islam are oppressed, etc., etc. No, Islam is a religion that wants to protect the woman, hence why it gave her the hijab. To the extent where, for example, with Lady Zainab, it's narrated that when she would go out of the house, Imam Ali would stand in front of her, Imam Hassan and Hussein on either sides, to make sure that no one even saw her shadow. This is the hijab of Lady Zainab. But when it came to her actually taking a stance, Islam never said no, stay at home.
No.
There is no such thing. There is no such thing. No, Islam says stand up for your rights. And she spoke so proudly, and she spoke with such, and to the extent where, you know what she said on that day? Till today, it is making these tyrants' thrones shake. Honestly, till today. And one of the things that she mentions, and that we talked about Arabeen last episode, I believe it was. We talked about Arabeen and how the walk is increasing, and how you mentioned that before 2004 people were trying to go and it was in secret. But that was all going back to the talk of Lady Zainab when she says, فَوَاللَّهِ لَا تَمْحُوا ذِكْرَنَا وَلَا تُمِيتْ وَحْيَنَا. You will not kill off our remembrance. That is something you will never be able to do. Whether it be Yazid, whether it be Saddam Hussein, whether it be whoever the tyrant is at any specific time. That is something they're not able to do. And the only person, not the only person, but the person who played a very big role in allowing this to happen is Lady Zainab.
She was pivotal to that mission, and I think it would have, where Imam Hussein had to do the physical sacrifice, her sacrifice, and to survive a trauma like that. We talk about nowadays about depression and all sorts that we have difficulty, but how did they survive? And it can only be faith. It can only be the strength that Allah gives.
It's her taqwa, it's her piety towards Allah. And that is evident when she sees her brother, she thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Exactly.
The tragedies she sees then after the day of Ashura, on her way to Sham, on her way to Kufa, on her way to Sham, the dying of Ruqayya in her lap. That is not easy. No. That is not easy for Auntie.
Let's not forget her whole life, starting from her
From
father,
Rasulullah.
From Rasulullah.
Yeah.
From
From
Rasulullah.
Rasulullah, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Fatima Zahra, Imam Hassan alayhi salam,
Imam Hussein.
Imam Hussein. So it's literally her whole family have been massacred, and yet she's still
That is why
steadfast,
they-
and she always thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Which is why they refer to her as al-Masa'ib, the mother
Masa'ib.
of calamities. Honestly, the calamities that she saw, there's no one that actually ever saw that. As in, Imam Ali, for example, he was in the bed on the bed with Rasulullah when he passed away. He was by Fatima Zahra when she passed away.
Yeah.
But he wasn't there with Imam Hussein. He wasn't there with Imam Hussein either. Lady Zainab, she was by Rasulullah with Fatima Zahra. She wasn't just there when she passed away. No, she saw the attack.
Yeah.
She saw when her mother was slapped.
Yeah.
That is very important. What she went through is unbelievable. She saw Imam Hassan's liver being torn into pieces.
Yeah.
She saw her own brother being torn into pieces. Her
Yeah.
brothers, in fact.
I think what the beauty is that Allah shows us that it doesn't matter. Again, I think one of the earlier episodes we had said one morning that there's no difference between the genders except for the piety. You know, there's no difference between human
Yes,
beings.
definitely.
And if you look at her as a female, you know, inherently we desire that protection that, you know, Allah gives. But there are some women who don't have that protection, and she gives that hope that actually you can be the strength, and you can be in your hijab, you can fulfill your responsibilities in Islam.
Definitely.
And anybody who goes through difficulty just needs to look at her and think, well, she's there to give us hope that whatever we come through, it's transient, and the focus is Allah. That's the journey that we must all go through. Nothing is too hard.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So would you like to recite?
Inshallah, just because I think our time is short,
Yeah.
I'll just quickly say the gist of the Arabic so that I can just recite the Arabic. So this specific part of the ziyarah, it talks about how Lady Zainab, she took charge and she gathered responsibility on the orphans on the day of Ashura, and how she was there and she lost the two daughters. Of course, this is how she was there. So, السلام على من تكفلت وجمعت في عصر عاشوراء بنات رسول الله وأطفال الحسين وقامت لها القيام في شهادة الطفلين الغريبين المظلومين. السلام على من لم تنم عينها لأجل حراسة آل رسول الله في طف نينوى وصارت أسيرة ذليلة بيد الأعداء. Specifically towards the end of it, it says, peace be upon her, whose eyes did not sleep so as to guard the family of the Messenger of Allah at Nainawa, meaning Karbala, and was taken as captive as she was humiliated at the hands of her enemies.
And actually what's very interesting is that this is only one part of the
only one
ziyarah. There's many more that goes into her conversations with Yazid,
Yes.
for example, and
Her other
that-
stances in Karbala.
Yeah, her other stances in
Yep.
Karbala as well, and in a sense, if you wanted to, because we said ziyarahs are, you know, from Imam Sajjad's point of view, ziyarahs are a lesson that he wanted to teach to his ummah.
They're recounting, aren't
Yeah,
they?
recounting the stories. So when it comes to, if you wanted to know who Sayyidah Zainab was, who her history was, what her lineage is, what her biography is, as well as her stances and what you can learn from her, just read the ziyarah instead of course, history books can write about Sayyidah Zainab. We can have a plethora of books that writes about the stance of Sayyidah Zainab. But if you wanted to bring it really to a short and precise literature, just go to her ziyarah.
Definitely.
Yeah, just go to her ziyarah. Amazing.
It's interesting, the word, she was humiliated at the hands of her enemies, and I know we
Yes.
don't have time, but although in the worldly sense these enemies thought that they were humiliating her, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but you know, subhanallah, how Allah has enlightened their names to eternity, that they are our, you know.
Not only was it that, but also Lady Zainab, what does she says? ما رأيت إلا جميلة.
Jamila.
Yeah.
Yazid asks her, how did you see what Allah did to your
Exactly.
brother? He says, she says, I did not see but beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Subhanallah.
I think it'll be a good end to the show in terms of beauty, and thank you so much for your beautiful
Jazakumullah khair.
insights into the dua,
Thank
into
you
the
so
ziyarah.
much. Inshallah, have a
Of
blessed
course,
day.
Yeah.
Likewise to
Yeah.
yourselves and to your beautiful families. Inshallah.
Thank you
you
very
so
much.
much.
And of course, we are during the time of Arba'een, and everything about Arba'een is synonymous with Sayyidah Zainab and her stance in Karbala. And so we'll show you more of the walk of Arba'een, the Zuwar within Arba'een. And after that, you can put on the kettle, of course, get your tea as we look to take a deep dive into the emotional aspects of verses of love. That's looking into the poetry and recitations associated with Muharram and Arba'een.
كوثر الخلود يا مالك الوجود لبيك يا حسين walking with empty hands searching your لبيك يا حسين wandering heart don't waver walking up to your savior wandering heart don't waver walking up to your savior as you're visiting he who stood firmly on the plains. Where is Yazid gone? Come to see now. Where is Hussein? As you're visiting he who stood firmly on the plains. Where is Yazid gone? Come to see now. Where is Hussein?
My name is Irfan Bimji. I'm from Orlando. This is my first experience for the Arabeen walk, and it has been a phenomenal experience so far. It has been a very spiritual journey, looking at over 20 million people walk around, going to one place, one man who sacrificed his life 1400 years ago. It's a revolution, it's a movement that's literally taking place, and the whole world can watch it. You know, the spiritual upliftment you get on this journey, all your sins are wiped away as you make each and every walk. As you go through each and every pain, the test that comes through, it really helps you elevate your status. Now that you're making the journey to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, you're now going to him in this state where you're all dusty and you're all disheveled. You're going to him and telling him that I'm here for you, Ya Aba Abdullah. I'm here to answer your call that you gave 1400 years ago. Hal min nasir yansuruna. And I'm here to tell you that I'm here standing for you. It is now my turn to show up. Imam Mehdi is waiting and I'm here for him now. Inshallah, we'll keep coming every year till the Imam reappears and we take this justice again.
والنهج كربلائي رايب يميني واحمل شعارك لا ما تذهلني كثر السيوف.
He said to him, Imam, what did you just say in honor of these Zuwar? Do you know how magnificent it is that Imam al-Sadiq prays for you because you visited Abu Abdullah? Imam begins the dua with these wonderful words. Allahumma ighfir li wa li ikhwani wa zuwar qabri Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Oh Allah, forgive me and forgive my brothers and forgive especially the zuwar of Hussein alayhi salam.
If you took one look at me, many they came to ask for what people ask, and I'm asking you for nothing. I came to give my hand and to kiss your sand and to tell you thank you, my king. لبيك يا حسين, up to you we came, بين الحرمين, calling out your name. لبيك يا حسين, up to you we came, بين الحرمين, calling out your name. يا حسين.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and as you've seen on your screens, the scenes in Karbala right now, it's reaching a point where Karbala is becoming packed out with visitors. From my experience, actually, when I was there during a 10-day period, up until about maybe 5 days before Arba'een, it was relatively empty. People were still walking, trying to enter Karbala, and most of the Zuwar actually you'll find within Iraq who visit Karbala, the many millions actually of visitors, is the locals themselves, the Iraqi locals themselves, coming from different cities of Basra, for example, or Nasiriyah, or Najaf, or Baghdad. the other visitors from outside make a small percentage, but they're still a percentage of the Zuwar coming into Iraq as a whole, from the outside of Iraq. So what we've noticed is that a lot of people come from within the locals. They'll visit Karbala, send their salutations, stay a night, and then leave. Whereas with the people who come from overseas, they usually tend to stay for more than 1 or 2 nights in order to visit the different shrines within Iraq. And what you've seen from your scenes is it's getting even more packed. The atmosphere is getting much more charged up for the day of Arba'een, upon which Karbala comes a standstill almost. But in any case, in this part of Morning Baraka, we are discussing, or this part is verses of love, upon which we connect to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. We connect to the message of Arba'een, of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and ziyarah in general, through tears, emotions, lamentations and poetry. On the topic of poetry, I am joined by my dear guest once again, Nouri Sardar. Assalamu alaikum. Nouri, it's always been a fascinating discussion with you. We've discussed so many things, be it your personal life into poetry, the reason why you write, the different techniques, the skills, who you write for. I guess today, because Arba'een is very, very close, I want to really take a deep dive into what ziyarah really, what the effect or the significance of ziyarah has on your writing and how that's changed over the years. Because you mashallah, you do ziyarah more or less every year, be it Arabeen or Muharram. So what significance has ziyarah had on your writing?
So it's funny because I still remember when I was about maybe 19 or so, I remember you telling me, you were saying when you go for ziyarah, your poetry is going to change like completely. Like it's going to, you're going into whole new worlds of poetry. And then it's funny because my first ziyarah, when I got there, dare I say, again, we've been speaking quite candidly, so I'm going to be quite honest. When I got there, I was almost a bit underwhelmed at what I saw in the first day or so, first few days. I think that's because in your mind you build this huge fantasized image that when you go to the shrine, you're going to die, or the sky is going to turn on its head. But what I realized about ziyarah, in my experience, is that it's not a massive impact there and then. It's something that grows on you. So the more you're there, the energy around Imam Hussein's grave and Abbas's grave, kind of just like, it's like there's an imbalance in your soul, and it kind of balances it out for you. And that's what I find.
Just on that note, before you say that, actually, my first ever experience entering the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was
subpar.
Yeah, it was very underwhelming because you build this image in your head, because all the pictures that you see is just packed out with people. So then and within the shrine itself, underneath the dome, there's different sort of entrances and exits, right? So like one time I saw a shrine, I thought that was a shrine of Imam Hussein, so I was gearing myself up to really talk to the shrine, and then it ended up to be, I think, Habib ibn Madahir. And then there's another one where it's the Shuhada, and there's another one where it's like a different shrine. So when I did enter, eventually I realized this is the one, like this is the grave of Imam Hussein salam. I saw like 2 or 3 people across the shrine or around the shrine, so I'm like, am I really in the right place? Is this the so when someone actually told me, this is a shrine, that's when I began to connect. But it was a bit of especially if you go out of season. So with Arba'een, because very different, as you were saying.
I mean, Arba'een these days is just completely like you can't even get close to the shrine, which is why I always try to go another season outside of Arba'een so I can get like close personal time with the actual grave. So like I said, it's something that grows on you. I've also find that was very interesting is that each time you go toward, and this is leading back to everything we were speaking about before, each time you go back to Karbala, you're a different person almost. And then each time you leave Karbala, you leave with a new lesson. And that's something I've definitely picked up on as well. That's what I've
So, I mean, so how was your ziyarah experiences affected your poetry then? I know you go a different person, you come back a different person and all that, but what's that done to your poetry?
It's funny because there's also 3 different types of ziyarah. There's ziyarah in Arba'een, there's ziyarah in Muharram, and there's ziyarah off season. I think each one gives you a different vibe. I think when you go to Arba'een, you learn about khidmah, you learn about service of Imam Hussein and what that really is, because you see the selflessness of the Iraqi people, you see the way they're serving Imam Hussein. That's when you realize what service is. When you walk into Karbala and your feet are broken and you can't walk anymore, but you have to push yourself to walk. It's like we grew up in the same center. We grew up doing martyrdom and all this kind of stuff. But compared to walking, it's nothing. Because walking, you're the only reason The only insane reason to keep walking on your broken feet, when you've got sprains in your feet and you're tired, is Imam Hussein.
Yeah.
There's no other reason. There's no other benefit to it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's an example of pure utter faith and selflessness. It's because there's no other reason to keep going other than Imam Hussein himself. I think when you go off peak, it's very spiritual. You know, you get some like alone time with the Imam. That's just beautiful. You know, that's when you do all your amals. You're there praying your rakats and just sitting there contemplating, and it's just utter heaven. And then when you go on Ashura,
That's another experience in itself, isn't it?
yeah, I don't think you can understand what Ashura is until you stand there on the day and experience it. When you leave your hotel on the day of Ashura and you just feel the air is dead, you just feel death in the air. You feel what Ashura was. And it's funny because I still remember last year I was there, one of my good friends, and there was a big majlis going on in London, and we would see like videos and Snapchats of the majlis, and everyone saying, "Oh, this is so amazing," and then we were looking at it, and we look at each other like, these guys have no idea what's going on.
Really?
Because like when you're there, it's and I still remember the year before that there was some sort of I don't want to get into it, some sort of controversy in London, and people were putting statements on Facebook and then God knows what. And I was looking at it, I was laughing. I was like, you guys have no idea what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, when you're there in Muharram, when you experience Ashura there in Karbala, you understand. And I can't put it into words, I can't put it into poetry, but you get it, is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. No, so just going to your poetry aspect. I mean, you said that, you know, when you first started off, obviously there was a very traditional aspect. From my perspective, when you were writing, it was very descriptive, because obviously Jabir, you took from Jabir, so he was very descriptive in his nature as well. So that changed, but specifically going to ziyarah, experiencing those three different aspects of ziyarah, be it the Arba'een or the Muharram or the off season. How has that changed? Because you go every year, but your poetry's changed as well. So how has that changed?
So more recently, when I started getting into spoken word poetry and stuff, and again I'm going to speak very frankly and candidly. When I went for Muharram last year, and before I went to Muharram, I was like spiritually, I was just in a place of complete bafflement. Like, what's going on? What's the reason? And I was so scared to get to Karbala. I was so scared to what am I going to feel when I get there? Is Imam Hussein going to be upset with me? Is he going to say, you know, what you've been doing? You're not writing poetry anymore? Because I hadn't written poetry for months, if not a year at that time, I remember. Especially like Qasida poetry, right? Poetry nohas and stuff. So I was really scared about what I was going to feel when I was there. But again, like when I got there, and when I experienced visiting the shrine and sitting by the shrine, I got the sense of Imam saying, you know, it's okay. I get it. You know, don't worry. I know what you're going through. Like, but ultimately, you know, do what you need to do. But ultimately, this is all that matters.
Really?
Yeah. Walaya is all that matters. And it's such a, you know, we're so used to hearing it all the time, and you know, and we always think, what does that mean? You know, how can you say Walaya is all that matters? How can you say Imam Hussein is all that matters? There's more to the world. You know, there's people making films. People are going to Mars. You know, there's so much going on. But when you I think the point is that, like we've been saying, it's the stepping stone. It's the foundation of what you're meant to be built on. You're meant to be built on walaya. You're meant to be built on Ashura. Imam was saying that's your foundation. Anything you do is an extension of that. But ultimately, when you come back to it, when you come back down to it, all that matters is the grave and the shrine and the azar. That's all that matters.
That's fascinating.
And it was amazing. Yeah, that experience was amazing. And leaving and coming back.
In terms of writing any poetry, what's your most significant poem about Arba'een?
So there's an event that Brother Sadiq Damani has been doing every year called the Evening of Grief and Sorrow. He does it every year, and alhamdulillah, I've been reciting there every year, and I try every year to write a new poem about Arba'een, inspired by, ironically, Basim, who used to release annual poems about Arba'een. And again, like, I can't pick out a specific one. Each and every single one, I feel, is beautiful in its own way. The most recent one that I done, I'm just paraphrasing the words because I don't remember the exact chorus, but it was something along the lines of, you know, the only time you won't see me in Arba'een is the day I've died. Otherwise, every single year I will be there. I know that when you go there and you don't see me there, it's because I've passed away. And you know, as you know well, there's a group of us, a group of crazy individuals who, no matter what happens, go every year. I remember one of our good friends. I saw him there at Arabeen. I said, when is it going to end? He goes, 40/40s. we're going to do Arbaeen 40 times.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, we can rest. So yeah, alhamdulillah, it's been a wonderful experience. And again, like the walk itself, going on that walk, it's a lesson of selflessness. And beyond that, I think even on its most simplistic level, you know, we live in a world of comfort. You know, we travel to America all the time. You know, it's very comfortable. You go to Australia, it's very beautiful, sunny weather, nice houses, nice cars. But you need to go back once in a while to the third world and just and it brings you back down, you know, to your humility when you see that people don't live, you know, like we do. They live without electricity. There are orphans there. There are people who are suffering there. They're not living in comfortable positions. I think that's very important as well, to continuously experience that. And I think that's one of the reasons, honestly, why ziyarah is mustahab so much. Because when you go there, when you put that effort in, that, and you're in the heat and you're in that discomfort, you've put yourself in a position of discomfort. So when you come back, you appreciate your life much more, and you appreciate your blessings also.
Yeah, you take time out of such a busy and hectic lifestyle where you lose sometimes the focus, you lose the priorities,
Exactly.
you lose what's really important.
Yeah, and that's why I said, like, all that matters ultimately is walai. When you get there, that's when you realize that, and it rebalances you, and you're back in the world doing what you do. With that perspective.
With that perspective, yeah, brilliant. Really appreciate your time once again. Essentially, our discussions are focusing on many aspects of poetry in your life as well. Just one last thing in terms of making Arbaeen I don't want to use the term loosely, but making Arbaeen modern in the sense that relating it to the non-Muslims from a poetic perspective. What would you say is the
I mean,
best
the thing
way?
is, just the fact that you have 21 million people walking and doing a march of protest, people call it, or you know, a march of whatever toward Karbala, is enough for people to turn their heads and say, what's going on? I don't think it needs modernizing. I think, you know, what is there is a result of causality of the Iraqi people and how they work. But just the fact that you have 21 people marching, that's a big deal. And what we need to work on is not changing that, I would say. What we need to work on is showing that to the wider masses. Of course, as you know, like in our cultural commemorations, there are some things that we just can't show to the wider world for obvious reasons. But this is something beautiful, and as you know, the media purposely turns an eye away from it for whatever reason. And so I think what we need to work on is not modernizing it or changing it. What we need to work on is bringing it to the attention of major newspapers, people who matter, people who are influential, and saying, look, here's 21 Muslims that are marching against terrorism, 21 Muslims that are marching for freedom and against injustice. You know, that's a story worth telling.
Why doesn't it get the attention it deserves?
I think because the only stories that sell are stories that involve fear-mongering. You know, if you're sharing a story about peace-loving Muslims is not going to sell papers, unfortunately. I mean, news is about sensationalism ultimately, and that's what sells. And you can't forget. I mean, I was interviewing someone in America a few years ago who explained to me that there's actually a multi-million-dollar industry in America of different organizations, different companies whose sole purpose, year in year out, is to spread Islamophobia. Their sole purpose is to spread Islamophobia. So there's a massive, if not billion-dollar industry there, specifically there to do that. And there's lobbying involved. So there's a whole motive there. And we have to fight that. And the way we fight that is by taking the good that we have and pushing it into the mainstream narrative. Whether it be people, you know, writing poetry, making films, making art, making documentaries, or even, you know, getting jobs in these news outlets so they can help tell our stories. That's very important, because I feel like a lot of us are stuck in typical jobs of you know, doctors or pharmacists or whatever, and because we don't have a seat at the table there, I know that's a phrase that people don't like, but because we don't have a seat at the table, we can't tell our stories at that table. I think that's where we have to get to.
Inshallah. It's always been a fascinating time speaking to you, to Nouri. I can always learn something new, and of course love sharing some ideas and opinions about the latest when it comes to recitations and poetry and how we can really move it forward for the rest of the community. On that note, the next segment from Zara on Dear Ma'sooma is looking into questions and queries. So questions and queries from the audience with Zara in just a sec.
Now I'd like to welcome Sister Ma'sooma. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How about yourself?
Alhamdulillah, good, thank you. So we have a general question this morning to inform you, and then inshallah you can share your wisdom. Dear Masuma, I've been married for 10 years. Me and my husband are both religious. However, lately my husband has been neglecting his salah. He seems to be having a crisis of faith at the moment, and I'm finding it difficult to cope with. I'm finding myself less attracted to him, and the more he neglects his religion. I'm more concerned that I'm not doing my religious duty. Please advise, and many thanks.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's a few things that I think we need to sort of look at. The fact that she says her husband is neglecting his salah. Now, generally, I think if the foundation isn't there, if the understanding of the salah is not there, if we're doing it because we feel that we're doing God a favour, then the minute something goes wrong in our life, the first thing that'll go is the salah, because I feel like, well, God's not giving me what I want, so why should I give him what he wants?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
So I think it's really important to, I'm not saying that this is the case,
yeah, but it's something
but
that
it's something that I think we need to think about, especially when it comes to our children as well. You know, to make sure that they understand that the salah is something that they need rather than something that Allah needs. They're doing it for their own benefit, and I think that's really, really important to understand. Also to ensure that I have a connection with Allah. So I'm talking to Allah outside the salah. The salah is a formal way of talking to Allah, which I've been told to do. But if I have a relationship with Allah where I talk to him outside the salah, then I will not abandon the salah, because I have that connection throughout the day.
Yeah.
You know, Allah should be your best friend, your counselor, the person, you know, the entity that you turn to whenever something, something good happens in your life, something sad happens in your life. You know, he's the first entity that you tell. And then if you feel the need to tell others, you can. But usually when you've told Allah, you know, you feel like you've offloaded and you don't need to then. So if you've got that relationship with Allah, then I think salah just continues.
Sure.
And it's much more easier then to connect in the salah, because you've connected to Allah throughout the day. So I think those things are really, really important. I'm not saying that that is the case in this person's life at all, but I'm saying I think that's some things that we should consider.
So what would you say to the wife?
She says she feels less attracted to him because he's neglecting his religion. That's a good thing and a bad thing
Sure.
Because it's a good thing that her likes and dislikes are according to Allah.
Yeah.
So it's good that, you know, she feels that sort of annoyance or upsetness that, you know, he's not connecting to Allah. He's not praying his salah. But at the same time, it's a bad thing that she's judging another human being. And I think it's about trying to get him to realize the importance of the salah, trying to get him to
being more of a help to him and finding a solution
rather than judging him, because the minute you judge someone, they switch off.
Yeah, and that could be her tomorrow, and it could be from the past, could be the future, that she has that tumble in sort of, you know, faith crisis that she's said to her husband. So she'd equally want him to support her, not judge her.
And the fact that, you know, God has paired you up with someone who will help you on your journey. So realizing that there's growth, you know, she's been paired up with him for a reason.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's important also not to just sit back and think it's okay. So make him realize what he's doing is wrong, but come from a place of love rather than from a place of judgmentalship, sort of thing.
Condemn the poor man.
I think a lot of the times our ego comes into play. And when your ego comes into play, then again, the other person doesn't listen. If I'm coming from a place of love, then it's more likely
it's compassion as well, isn't it? That, you know, show that empathy. Like I said, if it's an understanding that, you know, we could all be in that position, so not to be so haughty and think, well, I don't like you now, because I mean, obviously, it's not a desirable. But
it's, at the same time, you don't. You know, it's true. We shouldn't be comfortable with people who don't pray, but you know, again, she's there to help him. He's not doing it openly.
No.
I would hope he's not sort of sitting there saying, you know, I'm not praying and I can't be bothered with it. And, you know, sort of telling everyone. It's between a husband and wife, and I think that's important.
And that's perfectly goes on to my point of saying that, you know, where do you draw the lines of a, you know, spouse relationship? That, you know, do you have that right to be there, sort of, you know, witnessing, judging, condemning, and, you know, giving the, you know, the fatwa to your spouse, or to actually understand this is where relationships are kind of getting a bit different nowadays, where we think that there's an ownership, possession, that you should be what I want you to be, but actually, like you said, the ego, that the end goal is Allah, and you've got to help that person, just like Allah would, you'd expect Allah to always be there and guide you, and maybe you're that source
that
That
Allah
can
has
guide,
chosen to
yeah,
guide him.
to
Yes,
guide.
no, for sure, for sure. And I think that's really, really important to realise that, you know, you're there to help him and you role model it.
Yeah.
So even if he's not praying, you make sure that you pray. You know, you get up at Salah time. You know, a lot of wives will. It's not so much that he's not praying, but he won't pray when it's Fazila time.
Yeah.
It's fine. That's his journey.
Yeah.
That shouldn't stop you. So
No.
you know, you go ahead and pray, and you role model it to him, and hopefully he'll come on board.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I think, you know, a lot of people will ask, well, how do you know if it's the ego that's come into play, or you know, am I doing it correctly? If you're doing Amr bil Ma'ruf and you're doing it from a place of love, then the result is it doesn't bother you. The result's not on you. The result's from God.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're doing whatever you can because that's what you're meant to do to help this person, and then whatever they decide to do with what you've given them, that's their journey, and that's between them and God.
And Allah guides. He says in
Yes.
the Quran, doesn't he, that I guide.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, she could be a form of help, but ultimately it's going to come from Allah, and inshallah, you know, somebody improves. But in terms of the role of the wife, but how much do you sort of in a relationship guide each other, and sort of, or do you sort of go parallel, thinking this is my journey, this is your journey? Do you cross over and say, right, together we're going to, what's the best way?
I think the most perfect marriage would be when you journey together and you help each other. But it's very rarely that you have the most perfect marriage.
Yeah. Sometimes a spouse can actually be a test, can't they? So,
and I think generally, you know, you have to realise that they're an adult and they're on a journey, and on the Day of Judgment, they're going to be standing in front of God by themselves, and you're going to be standing in front of God by yourself, and you're on your own journey. And, you know, you have to make sure that you can stand in front of God and say, I tried whatever I could to guide the spouse that you gave me. Whether they took on the guidance or not, that's their journey.
Yeah.
But I did whatever I could. And when you're doing it like that, then you're going to do it, one, for the pleasure of Allah, and you're going to do it the way He wants you to. So your ego's not going to come into play. You're not going to sit there and belittle the person and judge the person and make them feel like they're useless because they're not doing what you're doing, or you're not going to think you're better than them.
yeah.
So, you know, when it's done from that perspective, then I think it's much more powerful. I think it's difficult when you're with a spouse and, you know, you have expectations from them, and when you're not getting those expectations met, then, you know, your ego comes into play, and then that frustration and that anger comes into play, and then you blame them for your not being as religious as you should be. And again, you shouldn't rely on someone else for your religiosity. It should be you and your relationship with Allah.
Yeah, but it's, you know, just going back to the point where you say about, you know, at the end you're standing in front of Allah on Day of Judgment as your own self, but the Munajat of Imam Ali, where they say, you know, he says that, and it's obviously from Quran, that, you know, the husband and the wife will be running away, and, you know, in that hour, that and inshallah
we of children, you know, who we sort of spend all our lives taking care of, and everyone, we'll just drop them.
And I think it's in those examples, it's more of the people that don't support each other to do, you know, the goodness in life. And perhaps, you know, if somebody was in a relationship with one spouse and there's manipulation there, there's, you know, evil intent, and then the reality there's not going to be hidden in that world, is it? So it's going to be, you're running away from your own deeds. You know, it's not that Allah's going to unjustly treat anybody. So, and you'll see the reality of even your spouse. How do you know what could be better than you could be? You know, we don't know.
We don't.
And we don't even know the closest.
But I think also at the same time, you know, you've got that extreme where you're sitting there judging them and you know, thinking you're better than them. But then you've got the other extreme where you feel like, okay, it's his journey, so, you know, his problem, I don't have to worry about it. No, again, you can't be that. You know, there has to be a middle ground where you're helping them, you're doing that Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, but at the same time, it's doing it with a pure niyyah, rather than doing it from a perspective of, I need to show him. Yeah,
and actually that goes with any family member. I mean, you mentioned about children, but, you know, with all your goodwill, you could raise them in the best environment, and they decide, actually, no, I'm going to go with what I want to be. And, you know,
it's easier with children because you still have a right over them as a parent.
But what if they become adults and they
even as adults, I think if you've brought them up with understanding the status of a parent, then you can still sit there and say to them, you know, this is what I'm telling you.
But this is Islamic perspective. But when they're raised in the West, and, you know, they can call childlike from the age of 6, and they come home and say, "You hit me," and I'm calling childlike. They have this element of, you know, self. You know, well, what do I want to do? And again, if, you know, and it happens in this day and age where children are becoming, you know, this, new generation less. Yes, some are becoming very religious, but some are becoming less religious. But even at that point, what do you do as a parent? You don't own your child.
No, I agree, but I think again, it's from a perspective of I don't think we're teaching them correctly. I don't think it's the fault of the child when they're young. I think it's the fault of the parents and the society and all of us as adults. We're not teaching our children correctly if they don't understand the status that God is. I constantly used to tell my children, I don't have to be an amazing mother.
Yeah.
I don't have to earn your respect. God's given that to me. You don't have a choice. You have to respect me. And if we can teach our children that, then they will, you'll always have that sort of hold over them where, when you tell them something, they will listen. And especially when you're telling them that it's coming from God rather than you. And again, it's not bringing it back to me. It's like when I tell my children something, God says this.
Yeah.
How can you then sit there and say no? But that has to be taught from a very early age, and it has to be role modeled. A lot of the times we want our children to learn these things, but we ourselves don't follow it.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think in an ideal world, that's how it works. I think seeing so many examples nowadays, I think with all the goodwill parents have, it doesn't always necessarily work out that way. And it's shocking sometimes. You think with what's getting taught in schools these days, and there's so much exterior influence on your child's life. It's not just the parent. And yes, absolutely, Allah gives that right.
Society has a huge
and it's so difficult. And I think, inshallah, that Allah, whether it's a spouse, I think sometimes the lesson is to detach yourself from even the people that you love, because it's again turning back to Allah and not thinking that everyone is going to be there in the way that you want them to be, whether it's your spouse or whoever that.
I think I think that's a beautiful point. To actually detach yourself, but then love them as an extension of the love of Allah. So you're not loving them separately. You love them because that's what God's told you to do.
Yeah.
And then I think it plays out much better because all your loves are as an extension of your love for Allah.
And you have no expectations, it's a selfless love, isn't it? And again, Ahl Bayt have taught us that beautifully. So inshallah, that's what the lesson of this sister will be, that she has that selfless, unconditional love and helps with that guidance. That she can
just role models it, and inshallah then he'll take that on.
Thank you so much. Inshallah we'll see you again. And next up are mini Husseinis.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Razia Husseini Karami. Today I'm here at Imam Hussein TV to work on a special project for Mini Husseini. So come on inside and I'll hear what I'll be doing.
Is our treasure, we will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala.
And this is my friend Abbas. Assalamu alaikum, Abbas. Me and Abbas are doing a shape together, so come on, follow us. This is my cousin, Hassan Daddy. He's a cameraman and he's going to be helping us set up the cameras for today.
Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. We will never let it fall. When we see it, we stand tall. Salute it and we then call to you, Hussein, help us all. We will never let it fall. When we see it, we stand tall. Salute it and we then call to you, Hussein, help us all. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia. Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever.
As you put the battery in this way, and then put it in like that. Yeah, open the screen, turn it on. Yeah, well done. Now put this inside the first one. No, the first one. Well done. Yeah. Oops. Okay, look, this one, you make it loose for it to go up and down. And if you want to keep it in a position, you lock it. Alright? With this button, you zoom in and out. Yeah. So you want Abbas in the frame. So bring it down, zoom in. Zoom in. That's it.
Abbas, I can hear you.
That's it. Look, once you're ready, you can click record.
The daughter of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Sakina alayhi salam. recited a very powerful speech in Kufa. She was so brave that people began to cry when they heard her. And also, did you know that that was time. Well, at least we tried our best. See you guys next time. Bye.
And welcome to the Fiqh section. We've just had mini Husseinis, and mashallah, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to see the journey of how a child participating in the Muharram activities, Arabeen, it's developing through those, and inshallah pray that our children, future generations, are able to benefit from the activities of the elders and as role models to teach them really for participating in the activities. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that we teach through their ages, and it doesn't matter. It's the impact of an unborn child, of a child that's in the cradle. It really, there's no limit, an age limit to say that a child is too young to start their commemoration. Which then brings us on nicely to the topic we're going to have today, and we're going to speak to Sayyid Mohsin. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me once again. I'm very well, thank you, and I hope you two are very well.
Alhamdulillah, very good. So
best of taqwa, inshallah.
Inshallah, and today's topic we're going to speak about youth and Arabeen, and really sharing on your experiences as prominent figures in our community of how to help parents instill the message of Imam Hussein, instill the message of Ahl Bayt, and how best to go about it really. So what's your experience?
So from Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, if we start from the beginning, from a fiqh point of view, it is an obligation on every Muslim to teach, especially fiqh. It is wajib for elders to teach their youngest fiqh. And on top of that, to teach them the lessons of Islam, whether it's theology, history, Quranic sciences, to teach. This is very, very highly recommended, and it is a must that our youth are involved in Islamic education and are continuously learning, and at the same time they are continuously teaching as well and passing on that knowledge to the next generation. Now, when it comes to Arabeen, this is a perfect opportunity for youth to get involved, to learn, and also to give back to their communities and give back to the younger ones. For example, in our mosque we should be seeing 14, 15, 16-year-olds teaching young 10, 12-year-olds fiqh. And we should be seeing elders in the community who are of the age of their late 30s and 40s teaching young adults, the very intrinsic, special secrets of theology and understanding of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the understanding of the status of Rasulullah, and also the Ahlul Bayt. This needs to continue on, and Muharram is a fantastic platform for that to happen. And Arabeen, where in Muharram, for those kids who may be too young for the majlis, and the majlis is too advanced for them, why not have a small creche or a playgroup where we can break down certain lessons taken from Abu Abdullah and certain lessons of Islam to teach them and to carry on.
Just to follow on from that as well, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis that parents put, as we've seen from the videos, in terms of Mini Husseini. There's a lot of emphasis that parents put on preparation for Muharram and Ashura, and sometimes you feel like the gap between Ashura and Arabeen, it may die down just a bit. Is there a way, like to bring it up, or why is it that, for example, the major importance, because I've seen from when I go to ziyarah, you see the level of people that visit and the importance that is given for Muharram and Arabeen. How comes that's not replicated back in our home countries, especially from a youth perspective?
I mean, it's a shame that for 10 days of Muharram it's packed, the majlis is packed, you can't even find, you've heard it so many times, can everyone please stand up and move forward, please stand up, move forward. And then, there's always a question and answer after Ashura, and it's like half the hall is empty. Where have the people gone? Let's not take away that, alhamdulillah, that they were there for the 10 days, that they did attend the 10 days and went to pay their respects to Abu Abdullah, and they benefited. But Muharram doesn't finish on Ashura.
course.
You know, the message of Abu Abdullah doesn't finish on Ashura, and it continues, and then it continues all year round. And I think it's very important that we continue to have good programs with good speakers. And
do you think that part of the reason that you've said about, you know, that after 10 days Q&A sessions are quiet, people have got their spiritual boost and they are now resuming back into what commemorating is it's heavy to go through, isn't it? You know, the whole crying process. But then afterwards, in the sessions that you're saying in the year, obviously connection to Ahl Bayt is a continuous journey. It's not just year on year, it's actually throughout our lifetime. But do you think we are connected with keeping our content up to date with how we're going to respond with the youth and have that connection? Because how we were taught will be different from when you were taught, from when the children will be taught in the future generations. So are we keeping up to date with?
Exactly. I mean, it's really harsh to say this, but maybe some people feel obliged to go to Majlis in Muharram and they just want to turn up for 10 days and then, okay, I've done my bit, I'm going home now, please leave me alone for the rest of the year. Unfortunately, this attitude we really don't appreciate. However, we still work with people like that inshallah 1 year they will come in and maybe their heart will change and that we will be able to see them more often. And we have the 10 days of Muharram, the 10 majalis, and then it's very important to keep going, because when you have the 10 days, the community and the crowd, they form like a rapport with the speaker, and they form this connection that together we've been through this emotional roller coaster of
even with each other in a crowd.
Exactly.
You're sitting with similar people,
and it's a shame that it ends in 10 days. Why not continue? Why not ask the speaker to stay a bit longer and have him do another 2 or 3 majalis every week until the end of Arba'een to keep the people coming in. That, okay, we're not going to carry on every day, but you know, on Friday, Saturday, Sunday we'll have a majlis. Please attend and we can carry on the topic.
Because just by you saying that alone, it sparked the memory of some of the youth groups that start up actually before Muharram, and their main launch is Muharram. But once they find, you know, because a lot of the youth, they're interested in the 10 days because it's just either it's the miracle of Imam Hussein salam, or generally their friends are going to be in this place so they want to be there. But you see a great buzz when it comes to Muharram and the brotherhood that they built. As soon as it hits the 11th of Muharram, all of those commitments are just, you know, down the drain. No one really does anything after that, and it really does die down. And then the next program that they've planned is for Arba'een, but by the time Muharram finishes and Arba'een starts,
it's been a long
time. So you're right in the sense, you know, you need to have that momentum going. But how do we keep that momentum going? It's difficult because you need to keep the interest of the youth.
Indeed.
And when we were saying making the speakers, having that relationship with the youth is very important.
But do we have speakers? I mean, I know there's some very good ones online, and they, you know, and we have a good content in London, and we're very lucky. But are they connected in the real world with the youth issues that they actually go through in the real world? Not in what we perceive as our community, say, oh no, nothing's wrong. There are real issues that our youth face.
I mean, I would like to assume that the issues are the same, you know, regardless of the generation, whether it's to do with identity and fitting into a crowd, whether it's to do with observing Islamic, you know, rituals and law within, like, you know, lifestyle. For example, can I shake women's hands or not at work and things like that. Whether it's to do with, you know, like narcotics or alcohol abuse, or even, you know, worse than that, like being bullied or depression. I would like to assume that these are the reoccurring social issues that are happening in the community that we can address. But it seems that with every new generation, there's something new coming.
But
and there's
don't
something
forget
that we have
also
to go and research, and we have to address.
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But don't you think that this generation, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, don't, you know, treat the generations as yourselves, because each generation is different. So with this generation in particular, they have a much more emphasis of enjoyment. You know, this is how we are in the West. You know, enjoy your lives. We're living once, and so, whereas Islam, where, you know, some children will say, well, you're always commemorating, you're always crying. How about in the year that, you know, do we need to change the way we actually bring them into the centres and sort of involve them into a community?
Indeed, we need to change our approach. We need to be able to listen, and we really need to get involved in how teachers teach these children and the different methodologies. Now, Back in my day, it used to be a blackboard with a chalk.
Yeah.
You know, and then it became a whiteboard with a pen. Apparently now it's with the computers.
Is it really? I haven't noticed.
Exactly, we haven't seen school in a long time.
Yeah.
But apparently now it's what they call an interactive board.
Really?
So, you know,
they're getting with the times.
Exactly.
We should do as well.
The methodology of teaching has to be reassessed and reintroduced, and then we need to implement that into our communities. For example, if children are learning on iPads and they have games and apps on iPads where they're learning from, we need to start developing Islamic games and apps for the children to learn from. Whether it be Arabic or Quran or whatever, we need to keep up with the times. And the most effective way of teaching children, this has to be done in our communities.
It's really difficult because you feel like when you're growing up, your parents or the elders didn't understand you, and then you're growing up thinking there's a bit of resentment when it comes to the community leaders not really adhering to what you find important, what your likes are, what your experiences are, and then we kind of fall into the right trap. Now myself personally, I'm of the age where I'm seen as the elders in the community to the youngsters. But am I doing the same thing that I said I would never ever do? And we kind of fall into that spiral. But how do we realize that we're doing exactly what our parents did? Do we realize? Do we don't?
And also I think in your beginning you were saying about, you know, the different elements that we have to instill in our children, the spiritual, the education, and when you hear that list in itself, you know, it's overwhelming because there's so much to teach a child. You know, it's not the morals, etiquette, you know, theology, you know, everything has to be, and it's not just a parental duty to do that. You need to tap into the resources in the community because it could be the speakers that are helping, it may be community leaders that are helping your child nurture them wholesomely, because that list in itself, how are parents expected in this day and age where we're sort of all working, we're doing this, we're doing that?
Definitely, it's just very extremely difficult, and I think this is why it's so important that each centre has some sort of think tank, or some, you know, where they will get some experts in, those who are involved in education, those who are involved in the social side of the community, to sit down and say, right, these are our objectives. How do we get to them?
Do you know something? In business models, they say get your user in, and you know. And I think here it's getting the youth in,
focus
saying
group,
what do you want from these centres? Help develop those. Don't knock the youth back because they're children. We don't need to hear from them. If we're trying to gear them, we'll lose a generation. You know, we could do if we don't.
Indeed, and I think what better time there is than Arabeen, where you've just had 10 days of bonding, you know, and like you said, like a brotherhood of people and a sisterhood. Let's not forget the ladies are there as well, and they're just as important. So, you know, you've bonded together and you've got some sort of inspiration and motivation, and why not take the next 40 days
to really cement that?
Exactly, to like materialize and take that energy and actually come up with, you know what, let's improve our community, let's start learning and let's start teaching, and let's get this going, this cycle going, so that, you know, the message of Abu Abdullah doesn't die and that we can keep that momentum.
I think even I was just thinking as you were talking, you know, even a child who's, you know, under 1 year old, to have a space for them, let them just connect to a centre that's a place of, you know, where I can learn, I can have fun, but it's not just a community centre where I'm going to go and, you know, watch everyone else cry. It's about really looking forward
on
to
that is, if you ask a lot of the youth that are in their late teens now, why'd you come to the mosque? You know, have you got a list of complaints? They'll have a list of complaints, but why'd you keep coming back then? I've got good memories. A lot of them used to come as youngsters and they used to see their friends there, and they used to play and they used to talk and so much, and that's why they keep coming back, to make sure that they have fond memories of their centre, they have fond memories of Muharram and Arabeen, and that's what keeps them coming back. They recognise the errors, and we're trying to do something, and inshallah we'll get the right recipe one day. But it's very important, like you said, that when they're young, to have space for them, that, you know what, you lot of 5-year-olds, go play, come to the mosque and play, here's some toys.
Exactly.
You know,
and it's really fascinating because most of the kids from the age 1, 2, 3 up until the age of 15, they don't really care much about what's going on. They'll copy our parents. They'll copy what we do in terms of the matam and the crying and stuff like that, whether they understand it or not. That, for me personally, that's not my main concern. My main concern is that they grow up in an environment, in an institution that feeds into their psyche, into their memory, into their experiences, because those experiences will cement the way they see life and the way they see religious views.
Absolutely.
So when they get to an age when they say, okay, now they begin to ask questions, we're going to be there, ready, available to answer those questions. But as long as it's cemented into their memory, and it's actually quite scientific, because when you're first born, up until the age of about 6 or 7, every experience that you gain becomes part and parcel of the connections within your brain. And then once you reach the age of 18, 19, 20, it becomes very hard for those views to untangle. Like for example, why we say that reverts should be, you know, like revered in a sense, because they've grown up for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of one specific lifestyle. Their worldview is in a specific way. For them to go back to their memories, to their, I think it's called synapses, and to untangle the hardware that they've cemented, it's very, very difficult.
Rearrange.
So we want our kids to have those wired connections entrenched within the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, so that when they reach the ages of 20, 25, it's not wavering. Their love is still cemented. But as you said very perfectly, we want them to come and enjoy themselves in the beginning. It's not about stuffing religion down their throats from a young age. It's all about them just expressing themselves, let them enjoy themselves and play and whatever it may be. And then there's a time for, you know,
I think the way you can teach children through love, and obviously discipline as well, is very important, because I think, you know, of so many people you speak to, and their memories maybe, yes, we went to the mosque, we got told off, and those are responsibility of the adults to actually look at these children as the future, and not to say they're a burden or why are you here making noise. The elders need to hear, well, the elders have already cemented their, you know, their links, but it's about the children developing them in the future.
And I think unfortunately children are sometimes, and the youth are neglected in these centres, and because, you know, we're getting into politics here, but like, you know, like those who donate are expecting something, you know, of their level, and something to relate to them, and not the youth who have done nothing in forms of contribution. But then the youth have so much to contribute. If it's not wealth, it's definitely in ideas and in you know, different programs and workshops, and a new methodology and a new way and a new, you know, style of revamping, you could say, and rebranding the centre.
I think we always need to remember the youth are the future, and we have to invest in that future. So we've run out of time
for ages. I know that we can talk about this for a very, very long time, but as Zara was saying, you know, we've run out of time.
Thank you so much. That's very informative, and I hope the viewers have been able to gain some insight and, you know, knowledge, and perhaps we can all go forward, brainstorm together.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, keep us in your du'as. Till next time.
Many thanks for your time, Sayyid.
Thank you very much,
as Zara said, and of course, just for the benefit of our viewers, we have brought to a close this morning's session of Morning Baraka, and inshallah we will see you in the next couple of episodes, or the next episode actually, where again we'll be taking a deep dive into the jurisprudential context of Muharram and Safar, namely Ashura and Arabeen, and seeing the spiritual benefits and what the jurisprudence will say is the recommended acts and the acts that we should refrain from doing during these times. So for myself and Zara, thank you so much for your time, and inshallah we will see you in the next episode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.